Hey guys, it's Wheezy here and welcome to a different video. So today I'm taking a little bit of a different direction with this video. I want to keep the Founder Academy solely towards kind of gameplay in that series, but there's a lot of topics that I want to address on the FIFA community, about the game, about myself personally, anything that is kind of revolving my opinion on it. I want to kind of keep that somewhat away from the series because I tend to go off on a little bit of a tangent. So what this video is going to be, I'm calling this new sort of series Talking Heads. So what I wanted to do was take a topic or a couple topics and kind of address them head on. Not necessarily fill it with as much gameplay, but also address any concerns or any questions that you guys might have about me or the game or anything. So first of all, I want to address, there's been questions about whether I did work there, whether I didn't work there. So what I wanted to do was kind of put some of this stuff to bed, so you know, there isn't any questions about that. I've been more active on the Reddit forums, and anytime I've made that claim about being a former EA employee, people tend to think that I'm just full of it. So that's a fair assumption, because there are a lot of people out there that do make that egregious claim that, oh, I work there, I've worked there, I know this, I know that. And that's fine. I mean, basically what I want to do today is tell you guys about what I did there. So I started there in 2005. I worked there for 4 years until 2009. I started as a marketing intern and then worked my way up to marketing assistant and then worked as an assistant product manager. I was laid off in 2009. That was the start of the recession. I kind of got caught in a bit of a middle management position. I probably was a little bit cockier than I needed to be at that age and didn't exert as much you know, value, I guess, as I probably should have, and that was my first taste of layoffs. So I unfortunately got laid off as part of some other layoffs that they were doing. As I mentioned, that was part of the start of the recession, so I think they were looking at cutting costs a little bit, and I got caught in the middle there. But it was a learning lesson for me. I loved my time there, had a great time there. And I don't have any ill will towards anybody or the company as a whole. I still talk to a lot of the people that still work there. I still have some great friends, and I made some great friends and some great connections from my time there. I don't know if there's a better way that I can prove that I work there. I'll try to put these pictures up on the screen up in the corner here and see if I can make that work. Here's a couple pictures. Bear in mind that this was like 2005, 2006. But we did like a photo shoot, so excuse me for you know, the haircuts and how scrawny I looked and everything. But you know, you can kind of see them wearing an EA shirt in this picture. This is one of my coworkers' desks that sat next to me. We pranked him and put a whole bunch of bottles on it, but just kind of shows you a bit of the office, at least at that time, where the marketing department sat. This is just a picture of our patio from the outside of it. You guys obviously recognize the pitch. This is a picture from down on the third floor of the development team. So that was where the FIFA department started. A picture of a friend of mine who's working. He moved from the marketing department down into the production side of it. It's a picture of me and one of the other guys. We were kind of going around doing a photo shoot. This is a funny picture of me in the front of the building holding the EA sign. Insert joke here. This is me. I was in Houston at this time working on FIFA Street, and we basically did a tournament series where we had this guy who won kind of a remote tournament that we were running there. This is down in the editing studios where you basically cut any videos that are made, and we pranked one of the video editors and basically wrapped his computer with tape. And then this is another picture of me and a friend of mine who also doesn't work there anymore, but we were both marketing assistants at the time, and they brought in the WWE belts, so that was kind of a cool experience. The only other thing that I could think of to kind of prove this was, I'll put this copy of the game up. This was FIFA 2007, and it's also one of my prized possessions, but Ronaldinho was one of the cover athletes, and I don't know if you guys can see this, but he did autograph the jersey there, kind of remotely. We'll show it, but it's one of my favorite possessions. I do need to get it framed, but you know, I've got a couple other ones. You know, Alexander Ovechkin, the Washington Capitals one, you guys can see that. So we did get some perks when you worked there. I was also Dwayne Wade, who's one of my favorite basketball players of all time now, worked on that when I worked on NBA Live. So that was a really cool experience. Also, the only other thing that I could think of, well, two other things. One is when you do work at EA, you do get plaques. I live in Toronto now, so I don't have my plaques. Are back home in Vancouver in my storage locker at my condo in Vancouver that I still own, and that's basically when you launch a game, you get a plaque. It's got a disc on it. It's got a cover. It's got the cover art, and they basically frame it. They put your name on it. Anyone who works there can confirm that, and they give you one for every title that you worked on. So I think I've got like 18 of those back in my locker back in Vancouver. And I love those plaques. They're really cool, but they were hard to, I didn't want to lug them across the country. They got glass on them. They're very kind of delicate, and if you smash one, I didn't want to smash one moving all my stuff across the country. But I'll try to take a picture next time I'm in Vancouver visiting and get a chance to go and check on my my condo there. But it is a cool little thing, and hopefully that will kind of put to rest some of the questions about whether I work there or not. The only other thing I could think of was people always ask me, oh, you must know Chew Boy then. I don't know Chew Boy. I never met him, and conveniently, I guess for this, like, he actually started working there, to the best of my knowledge, almost directly after. Like I said, I finished in 09, and he must have started in 09 or 010, and you know, that is pretty much it. But he does pop up on my Facebook feed, because even though we're not directly friends, some of my friends that we have mutually, we've got about 20 of them. I think I looked the other day just to see if we had any mutual friends, and we've got about 20 of them from just former EA employees that are kind of all over the globe. So yeah, the only other person I could think of is Tyler Blair. Him and I worked together very briefly. He worked in QA on FIFA. I believe he's a content guy now, and a well-known producer, I guess, for the Ultimate Team series, and he's one of the more active people on Twitter. So great guy, very easygoing guy, and definitely somebody to follow on Twitter. So if there's any questions, if anyone has any doubts about it, you can ask me anything about it, or if you know anybody that is even loosely affiliated with the game that worked back then, or knows somebody, there's probably 2 or 3 degrees of separation. Somebody can confirm whether I worked there. But I just want to put that to rest, because people always question whether I did or not, and like they'll like laugh, oh yeah, I'm sure you worked there, buddy, ha ha ha, yeah, right. So I'm not just making it up when I say that I did work there. One of the other questions that I get a lot is how I know Nick. So Nick and I, obviously I've been on some of his videos, and by no means am I want to promote my channel by associating myself with Nick necessarily. You know, he's done a really great job of building his channel from nothing. Nick and I know each other through his cousin. His cousin is one of my best friends. I think we're both groomsmen at his wedding coming up. And we met in 2009, right after I'd left EA, and I had still been playing a lot of Ultimate Team because I still love the mode, obviously, and I think I introduced him to the actual game. I remember playing it at his house when he had been living in his first condo when I first met him, and we essentially developed a friendship through playing a lot of that, and we would meet up and we'd play for hours on end, like FIFA 09, FIFA 10, FIFA 11, 12, 13, 14, right up until he started YouTube. And then we kind of, even though we don't talk as much, he's still, I consider him, you know, one of my better friends. Nick has always been there for me. He's been a great, reliable guy. We fight and we bicker a lot, but at the same time, I still consider him like a brother. He's, think of it as if you've ever seen, even though he just passed away, Charlie Murphy's See True Hollywood Stories. It was on the Chappelle Show. If anyone's ever seen the Chappelle Show, they did this really funny skit where there was like Rick James and Charlie Murphy, and they used to fight all the time, but they were still like best friends. Like, that's Nick and I. We bicker about all this stuff all the time. We'll like piss and moan at each other and like get in these little arguments and scuffles. But at the end of the day, every time that him and I are in the same room, it's like I just saw him yesterday. He pisses me off and I piss him off, but at the same time, I still view him as like one of my best friends, because he is a very reliable guy. He's an amazing person, and I give him full credit for building up what he's built today. He had a lot of people that doubted him, including me probably early on when I didn't understand a lot of the online gaming community, but I give him full credit for building a lot of that on his own. He's done a wonderful job of building his Twitch community, building his YouTube personality. And like I said, I'm not trying to get a rub from saying that I'm associated with him, but a lot of people ask how we know each other. I worked at the game, introduced him to the game, and he just took it and ran with it. He just has such a love for Ultimate Team and FIFA in general, and a really good person to follow. So the other topic that I wanted to discuss today was handicap scripting and momentum, and a lot of those questions that kind of come up in the community. And the reason that I wanted to bring this up was there was a thread that came up on Reddit. I've been more active on Reddit recently, as I mentioned earlier in the video, and Nick28T, who I'm sure all of you guys know, he's one of the pillars of the FIFA community. And I don't know him personally. I've never met him, never really even had a conversation with him, but he's very active on the Reddit forums, and he released a thread yesterday that was basically bringing up his discussion about handicap, momentum, and scripting. And essentially what he was asking was for people who have the ability to record video to record things, and they would dissect them. Now, with that being said, I respect the concept of doing that. However, I think there are some holes in it. And it's not to take shots at him or anything like that. Like I said, I'm a minnow compared to what his channel is, and he does a great job of investigating a lot of these issues. However, I did think there was a little bit of a discrepancy surrounding the method of it, and the reason for that is when you take video, EA is very much a black box. They don't release information about things that exist, things that don't exist, whatnot. As we all know, they're not necessarily the greatest at that. So when you release video, we don't even know what the definition of handicap, of scripting, of 45th and 90th minute is. So there's discrepancies amongst the community about like what your definition of it is. So if we can't even really properly define what it is, it's hard to know what you're looking for. So having a video, you can dissect a video, and I could look at it and think one thing, you could look at it and think a different thing, and people could come up with a justification for it. And why it's such a polarizing issue is because there's two sides of the fence. People either believe it or they don't believe it. And people that do believe it, no justification will do. You're kind of blindly supporting it. And I hate to say that that's kind of me. I've got these kind of blinders on. But people that don't believe it on the flip side also think that there's a justification for every possible thing. And it's just like, look what you did here. You made the wrong pass, and that's why you did this. And in theory, that makes sense. But I'm a big believer of where there's smoke, there's fire, and I just think there's so many things about handicap that just seem too coincidental. So what I want to do is I'm going to read to you guys my post that I put in the Reddit forums, and I apologize for this being a little bit long-winded, but I thought it was the best way for me to actually describe it. So what I wrote in reply to him was, I'd like to flip the script here and ask you, Nick28T, about handicap, your opinion on it. So I worked at EA from 2005 to 2009, including on the original Ultimate Team, and the post-mortem of the game brought up some issues surrounding accessibility. Basically what accessibility is for you guys is essentially that's getting new people into the game, which I'll bring up in a second. That's primarily accessibility of new players. So now, although I can't personally confirm that these ideas ever saw the light of day, I do subscribe to the theory that handicap exists, or at least previously existed in earlier iterations of FUT. Now, I speak regularly still to a notable gameplay producer about this, and that I remain friends with, which is true, surrounding the subject, and he vehemently denies that there's anything in the game. You guys, some of you will probably know who I'm talking about, and he's actually gone on record a couple years ago as to like break down beliefs of it, and I do take him for his word. So I'm satisfied with his answers. I truly believe there isn't anything in there deliberately surrounding the matter. However, as we've come to see with EA in the past, notably surrounding the Inform controversy of last year, there's a possibility that something may exist without their knowledge. Also, EA and I know from personal experience aren't the best at disseminating information amongst the community. I think back to the EA forum days, when they were policed like Gestapo, which is true they were, from all the little minions that were given moderator status, would remove any mention of handicap. I've been timed out on several occasions, which is also true in the past, for even mentioning this as an idea. Ironically, I recall having the frustrations back as early as FUT 12 when they really felt prominent. Who remembers Brasilvers and the Silver MLS teams and Silver Serie A teams and how dominant they were? I know I do. Back then, there was a thread in the forums called The Asylum, which hardcores would go to, including Nick. And this was actually where I was first introduced to Nick28T's content, which was from a video called Ruined by a Randomer. And I put the link in the Reddit post. I'll put a link to the actual Reddit post so you guys can read it for yourself and see the video, in which he himself showed a very telling story of how a high-rated, overpowered team did not perform to their card stats when all put together. Essentially, the video, Too Long Don't Read is, or Too Long Don't Watch, I guess, is he had a team of primarily Team of the Year players. He played with them. They played like garbage. They wouldn't make runs. They would stand static. And then he went back to a spam gold team full of like Wellington, and I think it had like Loic Remy and Egbon Lahore and whoever else was in it. And they just played like gems. He like lost 3 or whatever. And then he won every game with his spam team. So, with all that being said, several years back, the community manager, I want to say Rob Hodgson, I don't recall who it was exactly, it might have been another member of the EA community. This is long after I left, but created a sticky thread that was to put an end to Handicap. They said, place all your questions here and I'll take a look at them and take them to the team and we'll answer them on the forum. People came in droves to ask their questions surrounding Handicap, scripting, momentum, and 90th minute goals. The thread, filled up and then magically disappeared a few days later. No answers ever saw the light of day. Now, is this indicative of EA uncovering anything and trying to sweep it under the rug? Not necessarily, but it definitely adding fuel to the fire in a community that love to latch on to conspiracy theories like they're a cure for cancer. As for me, my personal belief is there's something in the game, whether EA are aware of it or not, whereas your team, if they're too highly rated, 84 overall or higher, assuming that you have 100 chemistry, I'd always play with 100 chemistry, so it'd be a 184 team. And if you match up against a team that is below that threshold, let's say an 81 overall, you'll get Handicap. Now, what is Handicap? For years, from years of my FUT experience, it's a simple movement of several of your team's in-game sliders dropping down and your opponents moving up. Things like player acceleration, attacking awareness, ball control. You'll notice in-game off kickoff when your team's playing, and some of these indicators occur over and over and over, which I'll break down a little bit more. I'm going to skip those parts for now. I've experienced this year after year, notably this year when I purchased Team of the Year Messi, widely regarded as one of the best cards in the game. I purchased him and surrounded him with a team of highly rated players. My team rating was 86 overall, and Lionel Messi was sluggish and robotic. He would get dispossessed very easily by players that he shouldn't be getting dispossessed, and very low-rated gold players. However, he would have no problem with high-rated players. My team rating was 86 overall. Leo Messi was sluggish and robotic. Sorry, I already mentioned that, but he had a goal a game, or not a goal game. He had 1 goal in 9 games. So that was my output from him. I decided to then bronze bench, taking my rating down to 82 overall. Messi began to feel more prolific, and my in-game essentially went from 1 goal in 9 games to 17 goals in 10 games, in the following 10 games. Is this a placebo effect? Maybe. What I'm getting at is I'm a big believer of, like I said, where there's smoke, there's fire, and I understand that the idea of Handicap has become watered down and demonized by the fact that multiple people have a misunderstanding of the concept and essentially call Handicap anytime they lose a game and the reason they lost. However, why is this something that other people experience? Why is there a culture of bronze benching, including the best players in the world who are doing this at EA's pinnacle event, the FUT Champions Series? Why are there so many people habitually afraid of using full inform teams, primarily comprised of players that are 84 and 85 overall? Why are players like Martial, Loic Remy, Wellington, Musa, Agbonlahor viewed as overpowered throughout the history of FIFA when their ratings aren't as high as other players? These are all questions that linger heavily in people's minds. And until we get an answer, until I can play with a team that's 84 rated or higher without experiencing inconsistent performances, I'll continue to absurdly bronze bench my team in order to play how I want. Love hearing different opinions on the matter, though. So that was my post. Very long-winded. But it was very telling in terms of my experience. So like I said, I've been playing this game since day one. I'm a FUT founder, literally since day 0, like before day 1. Like I played it in the pre-release code, so I played, and I knew that this was just such a compelling game because it was so fun to build teams. However, early on, I never even thought about the concept of Handicap until about FUT 12. As I mentioned in my Reddit post, silvers were so overpowered that year. I had a Serie A, I was going to call it Calcio A, but Serie A team, which was, I don't remember every single person in it, but I remember El Shaarawy was my cam. I remember having Felipe Coutinho in there. Mustafa El Kabir was the greatest striker ever existed. It was all silvers. People would build for silver teams, and they were just so overpowered, to the point that I would come up against any gold team and that team would win, to the point where I wasn't even really feeling that I had to try. As conceited as that sounds, you knew that you would go into 50-50 tackles. Your players would just kind of come up with it. You could just play very haphazardly and your players would just feel overpowered and the other team would get dumbed down. So I want to break down what my belief of Handicap is. So as I said in my post, this is just my personal opinion. I have a feeling that at some point around the 84 overall rating, and it's funny because I've been saying this for years, so you can ask anybody that knows me well, I've been saying that 84 overall is the threshold for this. Coincidentally enough, I remember watching a Gorilla stream, a huge Gorilla stream, obviously known as one of the best FIFA players on the planet, and he said that his threshold was about 84. He tried to keep his rating down below it, and I thought that was so telling because this is one of the best players in the world, and he would feel a difference in his players. Now, again, maybe this is placebo effect, but I just think that's coincidental. So my belief is that at 84, if you're using a team that becomes 84, 85, or higher rated, so the worst possible combination is that you could have an 85 rated overall team, and assuming that they're all not even necessarily in forms, just 85 rated. You've got like Iniesta, you've got players like Modric and all these players, and they're just like gold players that are 85 rated. And you're coming up against a team that's below that threshold. So say if it's an 81 overall team, your team, think of it as, if anyone's ever played NBA 2K, think of it as the sliders. And this happens, to the best of my knowledge, it happens in FIFA. So imagine this is where the sliders are if you're playing it professional. If you're playing it semi-pro, the computer sliders drop like this. If you're playing it amateur, they drop like this. Like the players, the CPU's defensive awareness drops down, their offensive attacking ability drops down. So it's basically a bunch of in-game sliders saying how smart are the computer players you're playing against. So when you're playing on world class, the sliders are way up here. When you're playing against amateur, they're way down here. When you're getting handicap, what I feel is happening is it goes like this. So it's essentially like as if you guys were both on the same playing field, you'd both be starting at whatever, 50%. It just is a slight decrease on yours and or a slight increase on the other players. And the reason for that is to close that skill gap. The reason that I say this is, as I mentioned in my Reddit post, I was in the post-mortem from Ultimate Team 09, and a very prominent figure that had taken over Ultimate Team was very concerned with accessibility. What accessibility is essentially new players coming into the game, playing with their bronze team and getting just crushed by a gold team. People need to remember that this is going as far back as FIFA 09, FIFA 10, 11, 12, when back then you didn't have ELO systems. You didn't have other modes that were about, you know, finding a player that's equal to you. All you had was tournaments, and all you had was online single matches where you just get matched up against somebody who's readily available. So if you had a bronze team that had zero chemistry, you would play it, and if you got crushed 3 or 4 times, people would just lose interest and they'd be like, oh, I'm out of here. So they became interested in the idea of like, how do we close that skill gap? And conversations came up about like, you know, what were the possible ways of closing that skill gap and having me, if I'm a noob, coming up against somebody who's good, and like, how do I prevent that? There were no talks about ELO, there was no talks about handicap, nothing. This was just basically a problem. Now, unfortunately for me, I got laid off not that long after this happened, so I never really saw whether anything even happened with that. So I'm not claiming that this did or didn't go in the game, but anybody who questions, like, why would EA care? Why would they want to put a handicap and, like, hurt me? They're not about hurting you. What they're concerned with is getting as many people playing the game as possible, which is a problem. They're not a problem. It's an obvious issue that any gamer company would have. How do we get as many people playing the game as possible? I mean, like, why do I care about, you know, the Nicks of the world and the Nepenthes and the Mweezys of the world when they're going to spend the time playing the money regardless? This is like their core business. The people are we're gonna spend the money, we're gonna be playing it, we're not going anywhere. But that noob who's gonna come in and potentially spend money in the game, like if he comes in, has a terrible experience and bolts, we're not really growing our market. So they want to grow the market year on year like any business does. So anybody that says like, why would EA want to do this? I think that's a ludicrous argument. Like the point is they want to bring more people into the game. So again, remember that this is in 2010, 2011, 2012. This is happening before we had FUT Champs, before we had ELO, before we had FUT Draft, before there was a lot more modes that existed. So the concept of why this could potentially exist to me makes sense. Now, again, back to what handicap really is. My definition of it is basically creating a bit of a skill gap, closing of the skill gap so that teams and players can actually play on a level playing field. Now that seems crazy to some people, and I understand that. And again, I don't have literally physical proof, but I've played Ultimate Team for almost, what is it? It's 8 years in the making. So I think they've got 9 iterations of Ultimate Team. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So yeah, there's 9 iterations that I've been playing this. I've played thousands and thousands of games of Ultimate Team, and to me, it's very telling when I use a team that's 85 rated and a couple things happen. One is your players just feel sluggish to the point that, I know that's a vague concept, but things is when you make like simple passes, your players will lunge for the ball. So basically what that does is if the opponent's getting what we think of as a boost and they're running around like a bunch of bees, because obviously Ultimate Team is a sped up game mode, which a lot of people know. But when the pass gets made, if your player lunges to collect it, he's not taking it in stride, so it gives the opponent an opportunity to close that down. It's basically dumbing your player down just enough so it's creating a little bit more of an even playing field. It views it as just like, you've got a jacked up player, this guy's using some scrub lord, let's give him a chance to get the ball back. Player turning, when a player collects the ball, he'd turn at a slower pace. He'd take 3 or 4 touches to turn the ball in what should take 1 or 2. He doesn't take it in stride, he doesn't warp past players, basically gets it and kind of slowly collects it. Why this is important is because if you're jockeying a player and you think that the player is going this way, if you're the player that's getting handicapped, the guy overcompensates this way, but if you take 3 or 4 touches to make the turn, he can see that you're going to turn the other way, he could overcompensate and take the ball. So it just gives him a little bit more leeway to actually get the ball back. 50-50 tackles, your players kind of come in, the player that's getting the handicap for them will usually come away with it. Your players tend to fall over easily, they'll just kind of feel dumb. There's a lot of times where they turn, the ball hits them in the back on a pass, like they're just kind of, their awareness is really lacking. But to me the most noticeable one is just the players attacking awareness. So if I'm coming up the middle, when I'm feeling like the game is playing very crisp and I'm not getting handicapped, my players will identify that I'm going and they'll look like they'll be making intelligent runs. They'll sit off the back foot of the last man, or they'll just identify that I'm coming up the field and look to be making jetting runs. When I feel like I'm getting handicapped, and this is not a fatigue issue because this usually happens almost right away into the game, your players will come up and you'll have a player that's just standing there, not doing anything, and you have to manually send them on runs. You're just like, move, like get going. Like this was happening with Team of the Year Messi when I was claiming that I was getting handicapped. He was just standing there. He was standing in this very static position. He would even move in behind defenders. So it basically removes passing options for you, and you have to just manually force them on more runs than you should. This brings me to my other point regarding 45th and 90th minute cheese, as people like to call it, surrounding goals that happen in these minutes. Now, a couple things that people like to defend it when they say this doesn't exist is they say, oh, well, the minutes are longer, so of course you're going to get more goals. Now, this is a topic that I've discussed in person with a gameplay designer different than the one that I previously mentioned. But I asked him, I said, is this something that exists in the game? And he said yes. I'm not going to name any names because it's not my business. Obviously, I don't want to get anybody in trouble. So you can believe it or not. It's totally up to you. If you don't want to believe me, that's fine. But basically what happens is, just as I mentioned, you know, it's really a simple matter of as the slider's moving. Anybody that's played NBA 2K, you can go into the game and basically affect how the gameplay sliders work for that basketball game. If you want to customize the sliders, you can move the defensive AI down, you can move your player's three-point or his dunking ability, and you can basically play with the sliders. I don't know if you can do that in FIFA because I haven't really tried doing it, but you know, any sports game basically has sliders, as I mentioned earlier, surrounding amateur, semi-pro, pro. Like, you basically have default sliders. When the 45th and 90th minutes are happening, it essentially moves the sliders, so just the defensive capabilities of the team are dropping down a little bit, and the offensive capabilities are moving up. The reason for this is in order to initiate more goals. So it's to prevent ties from happening. So if you're 0-0 in a very tight game, if both teams are very fatigued and the players aren't scoring, it just drops it down and increases the offensive stuff, drops the defense down, increases the offense a little bit just so you can score more goals. And a lot of people would find this controversial because obviously they don't want to believe in the idea of scripting, and I'm not including this in scripting, but it makes sense in the sense that it's just in order to prevent goals from being, or prevent ties from occurring. So for this to happen, people lose their minds because they think, okay, well, if this is capable of happening, how come I'm not scoring? Well, it's not guaranteeing you a goal. What it's doing is basically just dumbing it down. So instead of playing against computer AI that's professional or world class, it drops it down for that minute or two to amateur. So the defenders are playing on an amateur level, the attackers are playing on a world class level. You still have to score. Just because you're playing an amateur in offline games doesn't mean that you're going to score every time you take a shot. It just kind of dumbs the players down a little bit just so it's more likely that you have an opportunity to score, as if you were playing against a dumber opponent instead of playing against a world-class AI defender. So to me, it's a pretty simple issue, but people have not been able to wrap their head around the idea of like, how come I either score every time I shoot or I never score because it doesn't exist. So it's one of those matters that I think it's a miseducation on it. At the end of the day, guys, what I'd like you to take away from this is use this to educate yourself and come up with your own opinion on whether you think it does or it doesn't, because it's very likely that we're never really going to know the real answer. Maybe not on purpose, because at the end of the day, human beings are human beings, and whether they think it's in there or not, the game is just code. Every game has bugs in it because bugs exist in every single game. That's a common misunderstanding, is that people think, oh, well, it's not a bug. People have seen feet go through heads and goalies lose their minds and the ball bounces in from a shot from half. There's bugs in every single game, so maybe it's just a bug, maybe it's a placebo effect, maybe we'll never know. But use these videos as what they are. They're opinions from people like myself, from any other YouTuber, but you can come up with your own determination of whether you think it exists or not. But the most important thing is to use these to understand that you need to just play with whatever team makes you the most comfortable. If you want to use a team that's bronze bench, use a team that's bronze bench. If you want to use a team that's 190 rated, go ahead and use a team that's 190 rated. I appreciate the fact that people want to educate themselves and they want to know the answer, but it's very likely that we'll never know the real truth, because it might just be one of those mysteries of the universe. So so much of the game is psychological, and I just recommend playing with the team that you're comfortable with, because playing comfortable, playing with the team that you're happy with, that you feel is going to get you a win, makes you feel better, and you play better when you feel better. So that's the best advice I can give. You know, it doesn't really matter whether it exists or not at the end of the day. People are going to have opinions on it, yes or no. So it's not the be-all end-all. It's a video game. It's meant to have fun playing. So that's all I encourage you to do, is take it for what it is. Have fun playing. It doesn't matter if handicap exists. It doesn't matter if the 45th minute scripting exists. You know, use this for what it is. It's supposed to be relaxing. It's not the be-all end-all of the world. So that's going to be it for me on the video, guys. I appreciate you staying with me through the whole thing and listening to my opinion on it. Please leave a like on the video and leave any comments you have down below. I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say about it. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate your guys' support. And until the next time that we have a topic, I appreciate you guys staying true to the channel and hearing what I have to say. Take care. Bye.